All right, so we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining FuturePedsRes for our kickoff webinar for our 2025 match cycle.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Maeda, and I'm a rising fourth year at Western University of Health Sciences College of Osteopathic Medicine of the Pacific Northwest in Lebanon, Oregon. And I'm a co-director here, and we're very, very excited to have you tonight. Thank you for being here.
And my name is Caroline Maltese. I am a fourth year student at Penn State College of Medicine. I'm currently in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And yes, been working very closely with Stephanie as the other co-director, and we are so happy to have you all here tonight. We would also like to thank Sheena Beatty, who is behind the scenes tonight. She has been working very closely with us as well to make tonight possible, so we would just like to acknowledge her.
And before we begin, we would also like to acknowledge our Association of Pediatric Program Director, Faculty Advisor, Dr. Michael Dell, who is also the Vice Chair of Education at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, and Colleen Hughes, who serves as the Associate Executive Director for APPD.
As well as to acknowledge our ComCep faculty advisor, Dr. Rachel Thompson, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics and Director of Pediatric Undergraduate Medical Education at the Boston University Chobanian Abdizian in School of Medicine.
We have an exciting group of speakers here today, and our first one is Dr. Megan Ayler, who is a pediatric hospitalist and the Pediatric Residency Director at Oregon Health and Science University. She was a chief resident and an associate program director prior to taking on this role, and loves that medical education has been an important part of her career. She is a longstanding member of the APPD community and currently serves as president for the organization.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm glad to see that Oregon is representing. I am out here on my back deck on a beautiful Pacific Northwest afternoon in the summertime, and so glad to extend a welcome from the Association of Pediatric Program Directors. This is a community of educational leaders who are thrilled to welcome you into our pediatric community. And so a huge thanks to the FuturePedsRes crew for this partnership. We really do value this relationship that we have in supporting applicants and programs in the recruitment process. Next slide. One thing that I like to do before any presentation with the APPD is just to share a bit about our values, because I think they're so important. And I think that welcoming you all into a community where these are the shared values and mission is so important. So I'm really proud that our mission at the APPD is to ensure the health and well-being of all children. We lead the advancement of pediatric medical education, the development of a sustainable and diverse workforce, the cultivation of an inclusive learning environment, and the promotion of educational innovation. This is really what our organization is about. We love supporting people and programs and trainees. Next slide, please. Just a little tiny bit about our membership so that you understand why I'm here today. We represent pediatric residency programs accredited by the ACGME and the hospitals associated with them to provide residency training programs in pediatrics. So we are comprised of 203 member programs and over 4,500 individual members from residency, fellowship, program leaders of all different types. We have coordinators, chief residents, fellowship directors, program directors, associate program directors, and the like. It's a wonderful educational community that gathers together for the promotion of this mission. Next slide, please. And really, as I mentioned, our focus is on supporting programs and the people that are in them. And we do this through a variety of different arms. We have a confronting racism action team that really tries to look hard in the mirror at our historical practices and ensure that we are really moving the dial forward in a positive manner in our organization and our training programs. We advance research and scholarship. We have a ton of curriculum development, as well as leadership development. And one thing that's really core to what we do is residency and fellowship recruitment, which is why I'm here this evening. Next slide, please. I am here to share briefly, because I know we have a lot of presenters, a bit of the work of the Residency Recruitment Action Team. And I'm going to share this QR code, which has a link to the recruitment website and resources. I really encourage you to take a look at these recommendations. I'll share with you the group of people that formulated them, but the bottom line is we really believe in them, and so you will hear a lot of advice from a lot of people, and I just want to assure you that these have been put together really thoughtfully by program leaders from around the country. Next slide, please. So who is the Residency Recruitment Action Team? This is a collaborative group that has been together since 2020, when we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic and needing to figure out how to pivot and to support trainees and programs in the midst of all that was going on with COVID, as we were trying to be facile with the recruitment season. And it's been so wonderful to have this partnership with APPD, with ComSep, with our department chairs, with FuturePedsRes, with Next Gen pediatricians, to think about how we have a shared understanding of the recruitment process and really be attentive to the needs of you all as applicants, and supportive of our program leaders as well. Next slide, please. Big level highlights. What I want you, if you remember nothing else from my portion of the talk tonight, number one, you've chosen the best field of medicine. Pediatrics is wonderful. I am so grateful to have found this profession, and I feel so grateful to be able to be part of trainee development and education. It really is just I can't imagine a better field than caring for the health and well-being of children. Number two, we as program leaders and as the recruitment action team, we are here to support you. We have your back. We want you to succeed. We really are so excited to bring you into our profession. And then number three, we really value holistic review of your files. You've worked really hard, and we want to be able to give everything that you are showing us a holistic review. And we are very attentive to the stress, to the cost, to the time away from your training that happens during recruitment season. And we want very much to be able to highlight our programs for you to be able to understand what is unique about them, while still being able to really not have this burdensome stress, cost, and time away from the work that you're doing to prepare for graduating medical school. Next slide, please. The first main highlight, and again, all of these will be written, all of them are written and posted on that website that I showed. The first is, firstly, our recommendations for this year continue to be that we recommend virtual interviews as the mainstay of how we conduct recruitment season. So I think you probably are aware of that, but to just underscore that that is the plan for this year. And we have come to this decision for this past several years because, first of all, we're hearing from applicants and programs that you really can get a good sense about a program in the virtual environment. Number two, and actually probably I should put as number one, equity has been very much at the core of how we have made decisions with the recruitment action team from the beginning. And we have really seen how the virtual environment, though it does not eliminate all inequities, can really help mitigate them significantly. Thirdly, cost savings. There is so much money that is saved by not traveling all over the country. And we know that you spend a lot of money to go to medical school, and we want to support being wise with your expenses. Next, we, as I mentioned, want to minimize time away from clinical endeavors. You're gaining skills now in training that are invaluable for when you start residency. We want to be mindful about minimizing time away with a significant amount of travel. And then lastly, the impact on the environment. There have been a number of studies that have shown the tremendous impact that virtual interviews have made in a positive way in really minimizing or decreasing carbon emissions with the decreased travel. Next slide. Additional recommendations. I'm going to give you a confession. The document is quite long, and so I really am trying to do high-level highlights. But some additional recommendations. Most applicants, I won't say all applicants, but most applicants do not need to apply to more than 20 programs. We encourage you to work with your advisor directly. You will talk to people in other specialties who are applying to dozens and dozens and dozens of places. It is expensive for you. It is stressful for you. Really, truly figure out what 20 programs are of greatest interest to you, and go ahead and throw your hat in the ring for those programs. Again, speak with an advisor because there are certain instances. I know that there's going to be a dedicated session for our wonderful international medical graduates, folks who are couples matching, especially with a couple in a really competitive specialty, may need to think about the approach differently. If you have a significant sort of flag on your application, you may need to think about this differently. So again, do speak with your advisor, but for the most part, applicants do not need to apply to more than 20 programs. Please make sure to signal your top 5 programs. We recommend to programs that we not release interview offers prior to October 10th. These are recommendations, they're not mandates. So if you get an interview offer beforehand, it's not that somebody is like going against some code of conduct. It is a agreement among our specialty. But we do, in the spirit of holistic review, recommend that programs not release interview offers prior to the 10th of October. And we also recommend that you all as applicants notify programs if you're going to decline the interview by November 15th. Just because you apply to 20 programs does not mean that you need to interview at 20 programs. Again, work with your advisor. You want to use your time wisely with your applications and your interview time. You will have interview offers. I would guess every single one of you will have interview offers that you will not accept. That is totally fine. If you want to cancel or not sign up at all, please just communicate with the program and let them know with a minimum of 2 weeks notice. Programs work really hard to pair the needs of applicants with the expertise of the faculty member. They work really hard to create an interview day that is meaningful to you. And those late cancellations can be very disruptive and take that interview spot away from another applicant. So we thank you for being mindful of that timeline. And then we ask that programs notify applicants if you are on an interview wait list or not offered an interview by December 1st. Next slide, please. I want to highlight a number of resources that are listed in the document. As I've mentioned multiple times, your student advisor, you saw that ComCEP is represented on our action team. They have a wonderful and important voice. So we really, really lean on the student advisor. This awesome FuturePedsRes group. Again, all of these resources can help support you as you are navigating this process. Next slide. A brief word about what about in person. We learned that last year, even though we recommended only virtual, some programs were starting to offer in-person second looks. We recognize that those in-person second looks can really put undue pressure and economic burden on you as applicants and extend the interview season, pulling you away from clinical rotations. So we do not recommend them. We recommend as alternatives that programs can provide city guides for the visiting the area or virtual second looks. And we also acknowledge that some programs will choose to do this. And so we advise sort of a harm reduction approach that if a program is offering in-person second looks, that they certify their rank order list prior to any visits, and that a visit should have no bearing on the rank order list. We do not want there to be any pressure for you to attend. If they are offered, this really is for the benefit of you to lay eyes on from 0 to 2 locations to help you decide. This is not to recreate a interview season. We recommend that they not be prior to February 1st, and that the RSVPs be external to the program, again, so that you do not feel any sense of pressure. And if I haven't made it clear, I really just want to underscore, if these are offered, they are truly for your benefit. You should feel no pressure whatsoever. If you do not need an in-person second look to help make a decision, you should not go. Next slide, please. Lastly, keep calm and thank the coordinators. You will interface a ton with coordinators across the country. They work elbow to elbow with the program leaders and the selection committee. They are integral to our teams. We love them, and they work really hard. So I know that all of you wonderful professionals don't need to be told to be kind and thank the coordinator, but I will just make a plug that sometimes things get stressful and you are feeling anxious. Please make sure to remember the importance of the coordinator on the team and really value their involvement. And I think, here are a couple ways for you to stay connected and informed about APPD. Again, you saw that link to the recommendations earlier, and we're just so grateful to have you joining the pediatric community. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayler. Our next speaker is Dr. Lavjay Bhutani. He is a professor of pediatrics, a pediatric nephrologist, and medical educator in the University of California, Davis Health System. He is the current president of the Council on Medical Student Education in Pediatrics. He also serves as the vice chair for academic affairs and director of the mentoring program for faculty in the Department of Pediatrics, and is the director of medical student professionalism in the School of Medicine. Within medical education, he is most passionate about reflective practice and lifelong learning. Dr. Bhutani.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome to everyone on behalf of COMSEP, which is the Council on Medical Student Education in Pediatrics, our national organization of educators who are passionate about undergraduate medical education with respect to pediatrics, an organization that I'm representing today. Again, a huge thanks to the FuturePedsRes leadership for organizing these sessions and for inviting us. I don't really have any slides and I don't want to get into the way of the rest of the session, so I'm going to be very brief and just say that like the APPD, as an organization, we are completely committed to teaching pediatric skills, not only for those students who are interested and committed to going into pediatrics, but to all medical students, irrespective of their ultimate career choice. But at the same time, we are also passionate about engaging and exposing students, both pre-med and medical students, into just the beautiful and diverse world of pediatrics that spans from primary care to super specialized care, both in and out of the hospital, to advocacy, to DEI work, to cutting edge research, and to legislative policy, to name a few things. You probably have seen and encountered many ComSeppers, as we like to refer to each other informally, as your clerkship directors, your associate clerkship directors, your site directors, your student advisors, and your discipline or pediatric thread leaders, and many in deans and associate dean roles. We are an inclusive organization and we're open to everyone, learners, faculty, staff, anyone who is passionate about pediatric medical education and wants to learn and grow together as a community is welcome to join. And we would love for all of you now or in the future to become ComSep members. So if you want to learn more about ComSep or just have any questions, feel free to email me and I'll put that in the chat box. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Caroline and Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhutani, for sharing. Our next speaker is Dr. Jill Azok, who is an Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and a pediatrician. Dr. Azok will now be sharing her screen to discuss navigating the ERAS application. Dr. Azok.
Thank
you so much. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see my screen? Perfect.
Looks great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Jill Azak. As you mentioned, I'm Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at Case Western. I'm also a pediatric hospitalist at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland. And I'm a proud ComSepper. Everybody on this slide has helped with this presentation, these slides. These are all proud ComSeppers, as Dr. Bhutani mentioned. So I was asked to give a presentation about the application. And it struck me as interesting that there's a certain international tour going on that has a very similar name. And welcome to the ERAS tour. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the application, but I am not Taylor Swift. So I'm not going to go through the entire application, but I am one of the student affairs deans, and I get a lot of questions about the application. So what I'm going to take you through is the areas that I get the most questions on from students. I have a limited amount of time, so we can't go through the entire application. One of the areas is setting preferences. There's a question of rural versus urban, and you have 300 characters on this. Honestly, program directors don't use this a lot. Don't get overwhelmed by this. It's okay to mark no preference. That's totally fine. If you really have a strong preference to either urban or rural, that's fine. You can put one of those. But a lot of students will be like, oh, is there a strategy that I should be putting? It's fine if you don't care to put no preference. The hometowns, this was introduced last year. A hometown is defined as a place where you currently live or have a strong sense of belonging or that you've previously lived. It was reduced this year to 3 hometowns from 5 hometowns. And then new this year, they've added in hobbies and interests. This was in the old application, and they brought it back due to popular demand. Program directors and interviewers really like to have this in the application. I would take this part seriously. The reason this was brought back is they like to ask you about this in the interviews and know about you. So if you put things in the hobbies and interests section, you are very likely to get asked about it during the interview. Experiences. This is basically your CV. So you're going to list up to 10 experiences. You don't need to have 10 though. A lot of students will ask me, oh my goodness, I only have 8 experiences. What should I do for 9 and 10? And they'll try to come up with, I volunteered 1 hour at this place. Should I add that? No. This should be like impactful experiences, things that you were committed to. It's fine if you spent 200 hours doing something and you only have 3 experiences. Don't feel like you need to stretch this to 10. But this is basically your CV type areas. They've increased this year to 1,020 characters. And then they want to know the primary focus area and the key characteristics. A lot of students think that there's some strategy with how you fill that out. Honestly, just put in what works best. This is not a key area that program directors are using. I mean, you can see Dr. Ehler nodding. They just want to see your CV and what you're doing, but don't put too much emphasis on, like, too much stress about what the focus area is, what the key characteristic is. Of those, you're going to choose the 3 that they're most meaningful to you. And you have another 300 characters to describe these, why these are the most meaningful. These are areas that the program directors like to hone in on. I can see someone put something in the chat, but I can't see it. If there's something I should know, just shout at me.
Jill, your volume is a little bit low, is what they're saying. Your volume, the sound is a little bit.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Can you hear me better now? Okay, sorry about that. Oh, I accidentally. So for most meaningful experiences, you can choose 3 experiences. Program directors, interviewers like to know what you're most passionate about. So these are experiences you're probably going to be asked about in your interview. Impactful experiences. This is optional. About 50% of students will fill this out. What is an impactful experience? This is something that made your path to being a physician more challenging. Either your family background, your financial background, your educational experience, like you were first generation, had limited exposure, limited mentorship. something about your life experiences, you had a sick family member that you had to take care of during medical school, something that made your path more challenging. Do not put something in here because you feel like you have to fill out this section. It is fine to leave it blank if you don't have something more challenging. One thing that they don't want you put in here is, let's say you're someone that failed step 1. This is not the area you put that in there. Unless that there was some extenuating thing, like I failed step 1 because I was taking care of my mother that was dying of cancer, that may fit, but they don't want strictly an academic challenge in this area. And again, don't fill this out if you don't have an experience that fits. It's fine to leave this area blank. Publications, you can list all publications. There's no limit, and these do not need to be just in medical school. Any oral presentation, any poster presentation that you've ever done. There's no limit here. Where am I coming with some of the things I'm telling you? There were surveys of program directors done, and you can see what they think is the most important part of the application is the geographic preference and the program signals. They do think the meaningful experiences and the impactful experiences are helpful, but here you can see that very few of them found the focus areas and the key characteristics that helpful. And that's why I'm telling you, just put what fits the best. Don't spend too much time worrying about that. So I'm going to take a deeper dive now into geographic preferencing and signals, because that's what your program directors are really looking at. So what are geographic preferences? You can list up to 3 US Census divisions that you're preferencing. If you select a particular division, only programs in that division will see that you've preferenced it. It's going to be blank for all the others. If you put, I don't have a preference, then all areas are going to see, I don't have a preference. I do not recommend leaving this blank, and I'm going to take a deeper dive into why I'm saying that. But these are the geographic preferences. You're going to see that some states will split oddly, where you're like, but I would want programs on either side. You just are going to have to decide what you want to do. What I recommend to my students is, if the bulk of your programs are fitting into 3 areas, I would geographic preference those 3 areas. If you're really fitting more randomly across the country, then put no preference. Why do I say don't skip this, don't leave this blank? So let's say that you are a program in the Pacific West, you're in California. You as the applicant indicate that you have a preference for the Pacific West. So that program in the Pacific West is going to see a preference for Pacific West. Let's say that you as the applicant preference the middle Atlantic region and the programs in the Pacific West. They're going to see it blank. They're going to see absolutely nothing. If you put in, I don't have a regional preference, then they're going to see no regional preference. But let's say you leave it blank and don't enter anything, then they're going to see the same thing as if you preferenced another area. So they're not going to know whether you left it blank because you just didn't feel like filling it out, or because you preferenced another area. And that's why I would just say, if you have no preference, just take the effort to mark the box, I have no preference, rather than leaving it blank, just so there's no confusion on the program directors. So moving on to signals, you have 5 signals in pediatrics. If you talk to your friends in other areas, they have different numbers of signals. A signal highlights your interest in a program. It does not guarantee you an interview offer. It's sent at the same time as you send your application. You can't add a signal in later. And according to AAMC guidance, you should be signaling both your home institution if you're interested, and away institutions if you're interested. There has been questions before of should you signal your home and aways, and yes, you should if you are interested in those programs. A lot of students will say, well, how do I even know where to signal? I haven't heard anything about the programs. I haven't gone to the interview. How am I supposed to find data? These are some of the places where you can find data. One is Residency Explorer, that all students should have access to through the AAMC. This has verified data from the application about the programs. Another source is Texas STAR. This you'll only have the data if your school participates in Texas STAR. One of the issues with Texas STAR data is this is self-imported by the students after they match. So it does have
the limitations of being self-reported data. You can also get data from NRMP, both the program director survey that comes out every couple of years and charting outcomes in the match are very helpful to find objective data about programs. FRIDA is also has data on it that is inputted by programs. And then there's also social media, but I would definitely use that with caution, both Doximetry and Reddit. And again, I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat. Just shout out to me if there's something that I should know in the chat going on. I'm going to take a deeper dive now into some of the data on signals and geographic preferencing. So who can see your signals? Basically, all the program directors and coordinators can see them. It's up to them whether they allow the interviewers to see them or not. About 20% of your interviewers will be able to see the signals. Most of the program directors are not going to give your interviewers access to your signals. How are they using the signals? 2/3 say they're using as part of the holistic review that Dr. Ehlers mentioned before. Nobody is using this as the only criteria. What does that mean? If you signal a program, you're not guaranteed to get an interview. 10% will use this in the initial screen. And about 75% of program directors said that they used it to help identify applicants that they would have overlooked. What does that mean? If you signal them, they're going to take a deeper dive at your application. If they have some criteria to get through applications really fast because they have so many, if you signal them, that's an application that they're going to go through the entire application more carefully and they're going to take a deeper dive, most likely. And then 86% of program directors said they would use it as a tiebreaker to decide who to interview. So if they had two identical people, they're going to interview the one that signaled them. So what is the data on signals? This is from both last year and this year. And you can see the data is pretty stable year over year. The chance of getting an interview if you signal is slightly over 60%, and if you don't signal is just over 20%. So huge advantage to signaling in terms of your chance of getting an interview. Geographic preferencing, what is the data on that? If you geographic preference an area, you have about a 34% chance of getting an interview, compared if you don't geographic preference, you're about 13 to 14%. And then if we combine signals and geographic preferencing together, you can see that that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck, is right here on your signal plus your geographic preference. And that's why we recommend, if most of your signals are falling into the same 3 geographic preference areas, that's why I would use those 3 geographic preferences, because that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. And then just some takeaway points on the application. Sending a signal substantially increases the likelihood of getting an interview. The effect is stronger when it's linked to your geographic preference. This is data that I didn't cover due to lack of time, but I wanted to keep it as a takeaway point. An in-state applicant is a higher likelihood of being invited for an interview than out-of-state applicants, regardless of whether they send a signal or not. You're going to be favored in your state. Similarly, your signals and geographic preferences are going to have a bigger bang for their buck if you're signaling out of state, because of the fact that you already have an advantage as an in-state resident. And what we know is that this data has been stable over 2 years. So we know that you do have an advantage, a big advantage, by signaling programs. So you want to be thoughtful with your 5 signals. They should be reviewed by either your specialty advisor in pediatrics or one of your student affairs deans, but make sure someone's helping you with your signal and that you're very intentional with those. And that is all I have. I'm going to stop my share now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Azok. We will now be transitioning into the portion of our presentation where we are going to ask faculty members who are present today to answer some frequently asked questions. So our first question is for Dr. Ehler. Since STEP/COMLEX 1 is pass-fail for students, what should we expect from a holistic approach to reviewing applications?
Thanks so much. When we say holistic, we really mean it. We're looking for the activities that you have engaged in. We're looking for your values to come through in your personal statement. We are looking at your MSPE to see what the comments are saying about your clinical performance. And we're looking at your letters of recommendation to get a sense of what your supervisors see as your strengths. So we really do look at the entirety of the application to get a picture of where your strong parts are as an applicant and where your growing edges are, to make sure that we are sort of aligning your values with the values of the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayler. Our next question is for Dr. Bhutani. Dr. Bhutani, what advice would you give to applicants about what we should include or avoid in our personal statements?
So I'm guessing, all of us probably have a slightly different take on what the personal statement should and should not be. But in general, I always like to tell students to think about what the intended goal of your statement is and of your entire packet. And that essentially is to get an interview, which is how many program directors will often use the personal statement, again, in conjunction with the entire packet. And then some program directors will use the personal statement in the process of selecting people who have gotten an interview to decide whether to match them or not. Generally, this is, to me, it's a very low stakes thing, but at the same time, it's a chance for you to distinguish yourself from others by showing something about you that is unique as a human being, as a person, and as a professional. And so think of the personal statement as a brief and a compelling story. And people sometimes think about it in sort of three parts. The first is your unique professional journey thus far. And this could be your journey into medicine, but more importantly, what is drawing you into the field of pediatrics? Were there seminal moments? Were there specific encounters, either personal stories or patient stories that led you to pediatrics? What did you learn from them? How did you grow from them? The second thing is what drives you? What are you passionate about? Again, is it advocacy? Is it research? It's quality improvement? And then making sure that there's internal consistency in that. So for example, you don't want your personal statement to be talking about your passion to advocacy, and then the rest of your package showing accomplishments in, let's say, basic research, because that is not sort of consistent. It's not sort of genuine and authentic. And so make sure that you talk a little bit about what you're passionate about. And then some people like to put what their future goals and aspirations are after a residency program. So those sort of would be three things to be thinking about. Having said all of that, make sure that this is not too long. In general, it's recommended that you keep it to 1 page or less. So again, just to recap, make it something which is personal, something about you, something that distinguishes you from others. Discuss who you are, what motivates you, what are the most important experiences that have helped shape you, and your future plans. If you do have gaps in your education that are going to be apparent in your packet, you really want to make sure that you address those. Otherwise, if you do not, then program directors and interviewees are going to interpret that in a negative way, as if you're hiding something, and they're going to assume the worst. So please address those gaps, but not only that the gaps happened, but what did you learn from that, and what have you done to try and address those in your journey moving forward. The things you definitely should not do are make these statements too personal, sharing intimate sort of details that really has no relevance to the intent of the packet. Make sure these are not chronologic descriptions of every single thing that you have done. And then don't use this as an opportunity to lecture others about, the state of medicine and what's wrong with medicine, or even go into politically charged or controversial topics. Those are not going to help you in your cause. And I think the last thing which my student affairs dean always tells me is please make sure there are no typos and spelling errors in your personal statement that comes across in a very negative light. So make sure your advisors and mentors get a chance to review these, look at them, share them with somebody who knows you well, to make sure that this truly comes across as a genuine and authentic you. And then also share them with somebody who doesn't know you that well to make sure that these statements flow well, and they make sense. I'm going to share the link of an article.
Dr. Butani, you had muted yourself on accident.
Sorry. I'm going to share a link to an article that was published several years ago that actually walks you through in a stepwise manner how to write a personal statement. And if I have the ability, I will also drop the PDF of that article. There was a question on gaps. So by gaps, I meant, let's say somebody has failed a step exam, or you have failed a course and you had to retake it, or you had to take some personal time off away from school, because those things are going to be obvious in your transcript. You really want to highlight those and talk about them upfront. And that is
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Butani. Our last structured question is for Dr. Azok. Given the virtual nature of this application cycle, how do we get to know the culture of residency programs?
Yeah, I think that this is definitely a great question. As we shifted to virtual during the pandemic, students were like, how am I going to get to know the residency program? I think the optional quote unquote happy hours with the residents is a great way to feel the climate of the residents and the program. So I strongly encourage you to attend sessions, even if they're optional, and keep your camera on. I also think it's really helpful if there's alumni from your school at a program to reach out to them, because they can also help compare your home institution to that program. And that can be a really helpful way to know the culture of the program, because they can compare it to what you're used to. Sorry, my answer is much shorter than everybody else's.
Thank you. Still very valuable, and we appreciate it. We now wanted to spend the rest of these last couple minutes with some time for moderated question and answers. We would now like to invite the audience to have any questions placed in the chat. And we would like to add a disclaimer that we encourage questions that would be pertinent to the group as a whole for our panelists to answer. And we may be tailoring some of the questions to make it more applicable to the entire audience.
So one of the first questions that has come in the experience section, is it okay to include experiences from undergrad or our gap years if they help demonstrate our path to pediatrics?
Yes. I don't have much to add to that, but yeah, you can absolutely include things that are not from medical school. I wouldn't have everything being not from medical school, but you can absolutely include things that are not from medical school.
I would definitely agree with that, Jill. I think if it is something that has been, especially if it's sustained, if you had leadership, if it's longitudinal, those are things that speak to your commitment. So definitely, I would certainly agree. And you want to also demonstrate that you are able to balance the rigors of medical school with some extracurriculars. So if you don't have anything from that time frame, it does sort of raise a little bit of, it would be unusual.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next question, do you have to signal? Is it optional? Do you have to signal 5, or can you signal less?
So you absolutely can signal less. There's no cost to signaling, and no programs don't know that you signaled less. So there's no advantage to signaling less. So unless you're applying to less than 5 programs, I would say choose 5 to signal.
Perfect. Next question. Is it acceptable to apply both to a pediatric categorical program and a pediatric medicine program at the same hospital? In what ways might this be viewed negatively?
So I can take first stab at this. I think you have to make a decision about what your priority is. And if your priority is to find a med peds program, and you need to apply broadly to do that, then I would work with your advisor to sort of figure out how you can put together an application and a list of places to make you competitive for med peds programs. If your priority is medicine and you're interested in a certain geographic area, I think it is okay. You should just probably proceed with some bit of caution, because programs want to know that you are committed to their field and committed to their specialty. And of course, there's a ton of, like, half of med peds overlap is with pediatrics. So it's not the same as applying to a much more unrelated field. But I think you just would want to really articulate your passion for pediatrics specifically, and your consideration for med peds if you're applying within the same location, because there's no doubt a ton of overlap and crosstalk with those. I mean, it's there will be overlap at the same institution. Jill, I don't know how you would answer that, or Love Jay.
Agree.
Agree.
Our next question, for applicants who are deciding how to go about deciding which residencies to apply to, what factors should they consider when seeing if they think the program will be a good fit, and they have a chance at matching into this program, whether it's step 2 scores or prestige of the program, etc.
I'm not the expert on this, but certainly I think a big thing is the feel for the program when you interview, even virtually, and meet with other residents. And then I would say that there are, programs often have an area where they either have a focus on or excel in, whether that's, for example, community advocacy work, as an example. And so if you know about that, or if you have others in your school who have matched in and are currently residents, and you get a sense that that truly is an area that the program is committed to, and that you would be a good fit, that's one way of finding whether the match would be good or not. I'm sure there are others that Dr. Ayler and Dr. Azok can elaborate on.
I have sort of mixed feelings about the Texas Star program, but I think that it is something that can sort of also help with the competitiveness piece. I think it's really hard, though, because holistic review is so valued. You used to be able to say, here are my step scores, here are how many honors I had, here's my quartile, am I AOA or not? And that data is really not there anymore. So, I think coming back to working with your advisor and connecting with them is important.
Next question that we have, should we list or mention any red flags / gaps anywhere else on our application other than our personal statement?
So you'll need to put gaps into the application where it asks for gaps in the application. So that's going to have to be listed in the application. I think in terms of red flags, one of my colleagues likes to always say, make your mess your message, and own any red flags and turn it into a growth experience. So it absolutely needs to go into the personal statement. It may or may not fit into other parts of the application. Like, if it's a red flag, is it going to fit in your experiences? Probably not, but it absolutely should go in your personal statement. But gaps should go into the application.
I also just wanted to say, we do have a lot of questions right now for our IMG friends on the in the chat, and we will have another webinar coming up in a couple weeks addressing some of those specific questions for folks. So we encourage you, if they're not addressed today, to ask those questions again at that webinar. Our next question, for, I guess, on those lines though, for folks who are IMGs, is there a good pool of resources that they can go to look for a mentor, or like a good list of resources for them to use? Or would you redirect them to some of the things shared earlier?
I think that the resources that we've shared are important. And then, working with your home medical school as well to see if there is support and advising that can be given from them, I think would be another thing to add to that. It's also, back to the data piece, you can look at the number of international medical graduates that are at different programs, and that's something that might be helpful as you are thinking about which programs to apply. Sort of where historically doesn't mean that because it's happened historically is guarantee that it's going to be the same split moving forward, or that programs that haven't historically taken a lot of international medical graduates won't be taking more moving forward. But I think that data piece can be useful.
Our next question is, and I'm going to just broaden this question a little bit, but what makes a medical student stand out? This question specifically was about away or audition rotations, but in general, what makes medical students be able to differentiate themselves to you on an application?
I think having passion in something is what's really going to make you stand out. The list of I think it was Lovejoy who gave the examples of different things that students are involved in, and a student who has a little bit in everything. So dabbled in research, dabbled in QI, dabbled in community service, dabbled in med ed, but didn't have any significant commitment to any of them, may not be as strong as someone who really has a strong commitment and passion in something, and that's how you're going to really stand out. Not that you can't explore things, because I don't want to say that either.
And I think when it comes to away rotations, they are not required in pediatrics. If there is a place that you are particularly interested in, it's a great way for you to get to spend some time getting to know a program, and potentially to also distinguish yourself. Just be mindful, as I think you probably are, that if you do an away, it is you're sort of allowing yourself to effectively kind of be on an interview for 4 weeks. And so, being mindful of not signing yourself up for so many. We've had students rotate through, and they signed up for so many aways that by the time they got to a certain away rotation, they were just toast, and I think weren't actually able to view the experience in a positive light, no matter how it was for them. So I would just be mindful about not overextending yourself too much. Like, do it for your own benefit, and recognize that the things that I'm looking for as a residency director are not necessarily to have the absolute smartest person who's ever walked the face of the earth. It is to have someone who is emotionally intelligent, hardworking, a problem solver, a lifelong learner, intellectually curious. And so demonstrating those qualities, being a team player, being a helper, being able to connect with patients and families, to me matters a whole lot more than, you know, having the right answer to every question that is answered, is posed on rounds.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayler. And thank you to all of our speakers too, who I see are in the chat answering some of the more specific questions. We do appreciate that. And I believe that that is all the time that we have for our open Q&A. Please, if you have more questions, we will have upcoming webinars specific to DO applicants, IMG applicants, as well as LGBTQIA+ applicants. So please refer to either the FuturePedsRes social media pages, our Instagram and Twitter, or the FuturePedsRes website as well. And we will be sharing those dates with you in just a second here. So I encourage you to grab your phones, take a picture of our schedule. But before that, we just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Ayler, Dr. Azok, and to Dr. Bhutani for being here, as well as to all of our participants for being here today. We really appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much. Welcome to PEDS, everyone.
If you did have a second, if you could just flip Sheena back to that last slide to fill out our post-webinar survey, would really be helpful to us in improving these webinars, and also get us some information about who you are, who we're reaching with these webinars. We would really appreciate that. All right, and Sheena, whenever you're ready, we can show them the schedule.
All right, and thank you guys all for coming. This is our schedule for the rest of the year. We encourage you to register for the rest of our webinar series by scanning that QR code in the link or connecting with us over social media. Hope to see you guys at future webinars. And I will also just throw that post survey link in the chat one more time for folks to fill out. Thank you.
Night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, everybody.